The bone is not the interesting part, the arrangement is. In 1987, Soviet archaeologists excavating a site called Yana RHS in northeastern Siberia, 500 kilometers above the Arctic Circle, found something that stopped the dig for 3 days while the team argued about what they were looking at. Not because the bones were unusual. Mammoth bones are common in Siberia because someone had arranged them deliberately, precisely, into a structure. A circular foundation, 9 meters in diameter, built from 25 mammoth skulls stacked in a specific load-bearing configuration, with mammoth leg bones used as vertical supports and smaller bones woven horizontally between them like a lattice. The whole structure sat on a prepared earth platform that had been leveled and compacted before construction began. This was not a pile of bones. This was engineering, and it was 30,000 years old. The problem is not that humans existed in Siberia 30,000 years ago. We have accepted that for decades. The problem is what kind of humans build circular, load-bearing structures on prepared foundations at 500 kilometers above the Arctic Circle during the last glacial maximum when temperatures regularly dropped below -50 degrees Celsius. The answer we had before this site was none. The answer after is one we are still working out, and working slowly. Because what Yana RHS contains goes significantly beyond one bone structure, and the full picture of what is there has been released to the public in careful portions over 4 decades. Today we go through all of it. Yana RHS is not one structure, it is a complex. Spread across a permafrost plateau above the Yana River, the site contains evidence of sustained human occupation across multiple return visits spanning thousands of years. The people came back, repeatedly, to the same location, 500 kilometers above the Arctic Circle, in conditions that modern survival experts consider among the most hostile on Earth, without equipment. The mammoth bone structures found at the site number at least 4 separate buildings. The largest is the one found in 1987. The others were identified in subsequent excavations through the 1990s, and most completely documented in a landmark paper published in 2020 by a team led by Alexander Pryor of the University of Exeter. That 2020 paper changed what the academic community could publicly ignore. The largest structure used the bones of at least 60 individual mammoths. The bones were not from animals that died at the site. Analysis of the bone surfaces showed cut marks consistent with processing at a different location and transportation to the building site. Someone was hunting mammoths, processing them elsewhere, and carrying selected bones to this specific location to use as construction material. The selection was deliberate. Skulls for the foundation ring, long bones for vertical supports, ribs for horizontal latticing. Whoever built this understood structural load distribution. Inside the structure, archaeologists found ash deposits from multiple fire events at different time periods, charred wood and bone used as fuel, and most significantly, food storage pits. Holes dug into the permafrost floor of the structure and lined with bone. Permafrost is a natural refrigerator that maintains a constant below freezing temperature year-round. These were not accidental holes. They were a deliberate food preservation technology using the physical properties of frozen ground. 30,000 years ago in Arctic Siberia, someone understood that permafrost keeps food frozen and built storage pits to exploit that property. The first known use of frozen food storage in human history, and it is not in the Neolithic. It is in the Upper Paleolithic. It predates what we call civilization by 25,000 years. The Yana RHS site also produced the earliest known rhinoceros horn tools, shaped and worked implements made from woolly rhinoceros horn found in the same archaeological layer as the bone structures. Horn is an organic material that degrades quickly under normal conditions. Its survival at Yana RHS for 30,000 years is entirely due to the permafrost. Without the permafrost, these objects would not exist for us to find. The question that raises is how many other sites at lower latitudes have simply not preserved their organic tool assemblages and therefore appear less technologically sophisticated than they were. The stone tools found at the site are also anomalous. The lithic assemblage, the collection of workstone objects, shows a level of technical skill consistent with what archaeologists call blade technology. Thin, precisely struck stone blades with standardized dimensions produced through a controlled knapping process. This technology appears in the European archaeological record around 40,000 years ago, finding it at a site 500 kilometers above the Arctic Circle. At 30,000 years ago means these people were not isolated primitives discovering fire. They were carrying an established technological tradition into one of the most extreme environments on Earth and adapting it with local materials. They also carried ochre, red iron oxide pigment found throughout the site in quantities that exceed any functional use. Ochre has a practical application as a preservative for animal hides and as an insect repellent. But the quantities at Yana RHS are beyond practical. They are ritual. The people who built structures from mammoth bones in the Arctic winter were also conducting ceremonies involving red pigment. This is not survival behavior. This is culture. Complex, organized, intentional culture operating 30,000 years ago above the Arctic Circle. In 2019, a separate genetic study published in Nature analyzed ancient DNA recovered from human remains found at a Siberian site called Ust-Ishim and related Arctic Siberian sites from the same broad time period. What the genetics showed created a significant problem for the accepted model of human migration into the Americas. The people who occupied Arctic Siberia 30,000 years ago carry genetic signatures that are ancestral to Native American populations. This was expected and fits the Bering Land Bridge migration model. What was not expected was the timing implied by the genetic divergence rates. The separation between the Siberian Arctic population and the ancestral Native American population suggested by the DNA analysis points to a divergence event significantly earlier than the accepted date of human entry into the Americas, which is currently placed at approximately 15,000 to 20,000 years ago. If the people building mammoth bone structures at Yana RHS 30,000 years ago were already genetically diverging from a population that would become Native Americans, then either the Americas were entered much earlier than currently accepted, or the ancestral population split happened in Siberia before migration, and the timeline of that split pushes back against several other established dates in the human migration model. Both implications are significant enough that the academic discussion around them has been careful and slow. The Nature paper was published. The implications were noted. The revision of the broader migration model has not followed at the same pace. The permafrost at Yana RHS has preserved things that would not survive anywhere else. Plant material from the occupation layers has been recovered and analyzed. The people at the site were consuming plant foods in addition to large game. In the Arctic, in the last glacial maximum, the plant species identified from the preserved material indicate they understood which Arctic plants were edible and how to process them. This is not casual foraging knowledge. This is deep accumulated botanical knowledge of an extreme environment passed down through generations of people who chose to live there. The site also preserved evidence of social complexity in the form of ornamental objects, beads made from Arctic fox teeth, pendants made from mammoth ivory carved to specific shapes, decorative items that serve no survival function and exist entirely for personal adornment or social signaling. The people at Yana RHS were not just surviving, they were expressing identity. They had enough security in their survival that they had time and motivation to make jewelry. At minus 50 degrees Celsius, 30,000 years ago, the Yana RHS site was first excavated in 1987. The landmark paper describing the full scope of its structures was published in 2020. That is 33 years between discovery and full academic publication of what was there. The permafrost preservation at the site is extraordinary. The logistics of Arctic excavation are genuinely difficult, but 33 years is a long time to take to describe 4 buildings and their contents. The researchers who worked the site across those decades published incremental findings. Pieces of the picture released separately over time. The 2020 paper was the first time the full architectural scope of the Mammoth Bone Complex was described in a single published document, available to the broader academic community, and through it to the public. What the complete picture shows is a human population operating at a level of organizational complexity, technological sophistication, and cultural development 30,000 years ago in the most extreme environment on Earth, that our standard narrative of that period does not have a framework to comfortably accommodate. The standard narrative describes the people of 30,000 years ago as capable but fundamentally simple. Small mobile bands following herds, basic shelters, survival focus. Yana RHS describes something else. People who selected a specific location and returned to it across generations, who developed a construction tradition using locally available materials in an architecturally logical way, who understood permafrost refrigeration, who carried cultural and technological traditions across thousands of kilometers of Arctic landscape, who made jewelry and conducted ceremonies and stored food for winter and came back to the same place year after year because they had decided this was home. We have one word for a group of people who do all of those things together. We do not usually apply that word to 30,000 BC, but the bones in the permafrost do not care what word we use. They are arranged exactly as their builders left them, waiting for us to find a framework large enough to hold what they mean.